In Syria, art and culture have become critical defense mechanisms in times of turbulence. The aptly titled book, Syria Speaks, is a celebration of people determined to reclaim their dignity, freedom and self-expression. It showcases the work of over 50 artists. Their chosen methods are literature, poems, songs, cartoons and photography. Although first released in 2014, sales of the book soared when a British Muslim woman was detained after being seen reading it on a plane this August. To tell us more, I'm joined by one of its editors, Malu Halasa. These artists faced many trials. They did not feel safe expressing themselves. Some might say when in times of turbulence, other needs take a front seat. What do you think it is that turned art into a primary need for these artists?
I think that from the question, I get an idea that you might think that art is separate from society. And really what was important during the 2011 uprising in Syria is that things were happening in the country that were events, demonstrations, violence, massacres were happening that were not being reported on mainstream Arab media and also on mainstream Syrian media. And the artists felt that if they were silent during this time, then the world and other people in Syria would not know what's happening. So these artists kind of, they were able to do something that even journalists in Syria at the time were not able to do. They were able to shed a light on the events that were the events that were taking place in their country when international media wasn't allowed to be there. So if you think that art is a frivolous pursuit, then maybe you are right that in times of conflict, art should be the last thing we talk about. But if you see art as being very important to society and also very essential in terms of the information and what it's depicting, then these artists, we needed these artists to work and show work and to express themselves and to post their political posters or their artwork or their installations on the internet. We needed to see what was going on in Syria when the whole country was trying to stop the world from knowing what was happening inside there.
Mm-hmm. So tell us your motivation to work on this book and how did your involvement come about?
I'm an editor and writer in London, and my books are usually anthologies of new writing and images from the Middle East. And I've also done a book that's quite well known called The Secret Life of Syrian Lingerie, Intimacy and Design. So I've spent a lot of time in the lingerie and cotton factories of Damascus and Aleppo. So my ties to Syria are very strong. So when the uprising started in 2011, I was, of course, shocked what was going on, but I also noticed that there was an incredible amount of art, political posters, music, literature, novels, poetry that was being posted on the internet. And I felt that this material needed to be seen in Europe and in the United States. And so it was in 2012 that I was working with Zahar Omarine and Nawara Mahfoud, and we did a big exhibition of Syrian art, of Syrian uprising art. And it was for 6 months in Amsterdam, and it was also for 6 weeks in Copenhagen. And during Easter week of 2013, 39,000 people came to see the exhibition. So it was really our involvement with the exhibition. After that, I went to the Prince Claus Fund, and they know my work and they've supported my books before. And I said, let's do a book. The material is too amazing. We have to do a book. And that's sort of how my involvement came about. But it really is because whenever I've done extensive work in research in Syria, and the Syrian people have been just like fantastic with me.
Mm-hmm. So how was the art received by the public? Did it raise discussions or evoke understanding? How was it received outside of Syria?
Well, I have to say that the artwork that we show in the book has been very well received. Matter of fact, I've just finished working on an archive of Syrian uprising art for the British Museum with the Middle East curator there, Venetia Porter. The people who've seen the artwork and who's also been to our events and seen the movies and listened to some of the writers that we've brought over, these events have really changed the discussion in the way that Syria is looked at. And also what's really important, I think, about the artists is that when you have artists and writers talking about the political situation in their country, or when you have artists and writers talking about how they do work, it's a much more intimate view of a country. The trouble with the sort of information that we're finding out about Syria now, it's all about the news. And when you have such levels of violence, people are, the voices of ordinary people are obscured. And what's really important about the artists and the writers and the novelists is that they're a way for ordinary Syrians to express themselves and say what's going on in their country.
So what can you say about the value of art in depicting difficult times and about the value of this book in particular?
Our book, Syria Speaks, Art and Culture from the Front Line, is the only book that has documented the creative expression and the outpouring of creativity that's come out of Syria since 2011. So our book is not only a lesson in consciousness raising, it's a document of a very important time in terms of Syrian art and culture. And it was important for me to do the book because artists would say to me that they wanted to do work that would somehow capture the trauma that their country is going through. And I'm very proud that our book provided a platform for these artists and provided so much of a platform that institutions like the British Museum or the Victoria and Albert Museum, they would come to us and ask us for the contacts of these artists so they could work with them.
Well, one can't help but wonder, where are these artists now? Are they safe? Can they perform art safely now?
Some artists are safe, and they are out, and they are working. And some of them who are out, they're working in the refugee camps, and they are trying to make the art that maybe at one time in Syria, art was an elitist pursuit. But now art is about consciousness raising and also about reconciliation. So those artists who are in the refugee camps, in Lebanon, in Germany, they're very active. Now there are some artists who are still inside Syria, and there are some artists whose identities are not known, because if their identities would be known, then they and their families would be threatened, they would be arrested, and if they're arrested, they're tortured in prison. So for the artists who are out, they feel a great need to express themselves and to work and to do workshops and to work with refugees and to work with other Syrians and to work with European institutions too, so that they can get their message out. For the artists who are still in the country that it's dangerous, they too are working. They're working even when it's still very dangerous for them to work. And it's really for those artists that work and live in danger, those are the people that I would like all of us to think about.
Malu Halasa, thank you very much for joining us.